Welcome to today's explainer. If you've been learning French, you're probably well aware that the rules can honestly feel a little overwhelming sometimes. It's a lot to juggle, right? But today, we're going to completely strip away all that confusion and focus purely on the practical, everyday patterns. We aren't just looking at the grammar rules, we're going to really master the sound, the usage, and the real-world application of these words so you can literally start using them right away.
This is such a common hurdle for learners. You learn a word, you think you've got it, and suddenly it looks completely different depending on who you're talking about or what you're describing. Ever wonder why some French words change shape like that and others just don't budge? Well, today we are going to demystify that entire process by breaking down the core building blocks of the language. It's time to stop guessing and start speaking with confidence.
All right, let's just dive right into this Unit 10 guidebook page. On the surface, sure, it might just look like a standard list of phrases and tips, but it is actually packed with essential, everyday rules about verbs, adjectives, and key conversational phrases. We're going to decode this page section by section to map out exactly how these French sentences are actually built.
First up is our engine, mastering our verbs. Let's start with the engine that drives any French sentence forward, the verbs. Because let's face it, without verbs, nothing happens. The guidebook lays out this wonderfully simple visual pattern for most regular French verbs, specifically those ending in the letters ER. Now, a really quick pronunciation tip that often catches beginners off guard. That ER at the end of an infinitive verb just sounds like a. Think of verbs like to eat, to speak, or to walk. The basic grammatical rule is this. You simply chop off that ER at the end of the word, and you snap on a new ending based on exactly who is doing the action. It's a foundational formula.
And this brilliantly illustrates the pattern using the verb marcher, which means to walk. In its full infinitive form, it's pronounced marcher. But notice how the base remains M-A-R-C-H, and those endings just swap out depending on the subject. For je or I, you add an E. For tu or you add es. And for il or elle, meaning he or she, you go right back to just adding an E. You're literally just swapping out the parts to match the driver of the sentence.
Okay, so here is the ultimate secret shortcut provided in our source material, and it is honestly a massive lifesaver. Those spellings we just talked about, they're all different on paper, right? But despite those spelling differences, especially with that added S for the to form, all three of these conjugated forms sound exactly identical when spoken out loud. Marsh, marshes, marsh. They all just sound like marsh. A really common beginner mistake is trying to pronounce that S when speaking to someone, but you don't. It is completely silent. So if you're focusing on speaking, you basically just got a massive 3-for-1 discount on your pronunciation.
Let's see this in action with a quote from the source using the je form. The phrase is J'adore Lyon, which translates to I love Lyon. The verb here is adorer, to love. We chop off the ER, add our E for the I form, and boom, we get adore. Now notice the spelling here. It's je''adore, not je adore. Because the verb starts at a vowel, the E in je is completely dropped. This is called elision, and it's a huge trap for new learners. Always remember to merge those sounds into a smooth j'adore.
Here's another one, this time utilizing the tu form, which is the informal U. The source gives us, tu parles anglais, asking, do you speak English? The verb is parler, to speak. We take off the ER and add ES for the tu form. But remember our silent S rule. You just say parle. Also note the real-world usage here. Rather than using a complex formal structure like Est-ce que tu parles anglais? Everyday French often just uses the statement tu parles anglais and just raises the vocal inflection at the end to turn it into a question.
And finally, for the elle or she form, we have elle habite ici, meaning does she live here? The verb is habiter, to live. We drop the ER and add the E for the elle form. A really critical pronunciation point to keep in mind here. In French, the H is silent. It is never habite, it's habite. So when you say elle habite, those vowel sounds flow beautifully together without any harsh stops. Once you master this framework and those tricky silent letters, you can apply it perfectly to hundreds of other verbs.
Moving right along to our next section, the paint, the adjective rule exception.
Now that we've got our engine, the verbs, let's look at the paint. These are the adjectives that add descriptive color to our sentences. French adjectives can be notoriously tricky because they usually change their physical form depending on whether the noun they're describing is masculine or feminine. You often have to add an extra E if the noun is feminine, but our source reveals a highly convenient exception. If the masculine adjective already ends in an E, it stays the exact same for both genders. No changing, no adding, just one single word to remember.
For example, the guidebook uses the word calme in the sentence ta rue est calme, meaning is your street quiet? The word for street, rue, is feminine. But because calme already ends in an E naturally, we don't need to change it at all. It just stays calme. This is a fantastic collocation to know too. We often pair calme with places like streets or entire neighborhoods to indicate peace and quiet, perfectly describing a relaxing environment.
This non-changing rule also applies to the word propre, meaning clean, as seen in the phrase ton manteau est propre, asking, is your coat clean? Manteau, or coat, is masculine. But again, propre naturally ends in an E, so it doesn't budge. Now listen up, because here is a massive exam point and usage tip. Placement matters. When propre comes after the noun, like it does here, it means clean. But if you place it before the noun, like mon propre manteau, it changes meaning completely to my own coat. Stick it after the noun for clean and you're golden.
Let's bring it all together now in our final section, the completed house, everyday key phrases.
So the crucial point here is taking these micro rules, our verb engine and our adjective paint, and building real conversational phrases, the kind of completed house that you can use right away in everyday interactions. Take a second and think about it. How would you naturally translate the phrase, tu connais Paul? If you guessed, you know Paul, you are perfectly tracking how these conversational questions are constructed. Now, another huge exam point for French learners. The verb here is connaître. In French, you specifically use connaître when you are talking about being familiar with a person or a place. If you wanted to say you know a fact, you'd use an entirely different verb, savoir. So, tu connais Paul is the absolute perfect usage for asking about your familiarity with a person.
To wrap things up, the guidebook provides this excellent vocabulary list centered all around neighbors and neighborhoods. Let's walk through the pronunciation together, particularly the nasal sounds, which are so important. We have mon voisin est amusant. My neighbor is funny. Notice how voisin ends in a nasal and sound. But later, we see je parle souvent avec ma voisine chinoise. I often speak with my Chinese neighbor. Because voisine is feminine and adds an E, that nasal sound totally disappears and becomes a hard in, voisine. Mastering that subtle shift from voisin to voisine is exactly what will make you sound incredibly authentic.
Notice how phrases like il travaille dans un restaurant and je parle souvent put our regular ER verb rules into immediate practice. It is just so satisfying to see the chop and add formula working in real-time sentences. Travailler and parler follow the exact rules we just went over. And what's really great is that whether you're practicing these sentences at a cafe in Paris or exploring the vibrant French-speaking neighborhoods of Montreal, these foundational rules for building everyday speech apply universally.
And we see our unchanging adjective rule applied seamlessly right here in the phrase mon quartier est très calme, bringing the whole lesson together into a complete picture. The adjective calm anchors the sentence perfectly, requiring absolutely zero mental gymnastics regarding gender matching. Just remember to give it that very subtle, soft sound at the end when you pronounce it. Not a hard stop, just a gentle breath to make it sound natural.
I'll leave you with this thought to consider. Learning a language isn't just about memorizing endless random vocabulary lists. It's about spotting the hidden matrix behind them all. Now that you've mastered these foundational building blocks, the identical sounding verbs, the tricky elisions, and those delightfully stubborn adjectives, how quickly will you spot these hidden patterns the next time you hear French spoken out loud? I bet it'll be a lot faster than you think. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep looking for those patterns.